The midday sun beat down mercilessly upon the ancient cobblestones of the capital, casting long, wavering shadows across the bustling marketplace where vendors shouted over one another to sell their wares. Amidst the chaos and the vibrant sea of colorful silk robes, a lone figure stood completely still, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through the noise. Murong Qingyi adjusted the collar of his deep blue outer garment, the subtle embroidery of silver dragons catching the pale light as he shifted his weight. For weeks, the whispers had been growing louder in the imperial court, warning of a looming conspiracy that threatened to tear the fragile peace of the dynasty apart from the inside out. He had walked this very path 100 times before, yet today felt different, heavy with an unspoken dread that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His hand instinctively rested against the hilt of his trusted jade-inlaid sword, a familiar comfort in a world where betrayal lurked behind every friendly smile and polite bow. Far across the sprawling capital, tucked away behind the high, ivory-colored walls of the Imperial Academy, Tian Xiwei sat by a polished mahogany desk overflowing with ancient scrolls and thick calligraphy brushes. Her brow was furrowed in deep concentration as she carefully traced the delicate inked characters, her mind racing through the complex economic ledgers she had been tasked to review by the Grand Chancellor. Despite her youthful appearance and the gentle warmth of her radiant smile, she possessed a razor-sharp intellect that frequently left veteran ministers stammering in disbelief during council debates. Outside her window, the cherry blossoms fluttered gracefully in the soft afternoon breeze, casting playful, dancing shadows across the floorboards as if mocking the rigid seriousness of the scholars inside. She paused for a moment, her brush hovering just inches above the rice paper, as a sudden, inexplicable chill swept through the room, making her heart skip a rhythmic beat. It was an uncanny sensation, as though the universe itself was holding its breath before unleashing a tempest that no one could possibly hope to predict. Back in the bustling marketplace, Murong Qingyi caught the fleeting glimpse of a familiar bamboo-hatted figure slipping effortlessly into a shadowy alleyway known for its illicit dealings. Without a moment of hesitation, he abandoned his path and surged forward, weaving gracefully through the astonished crowd of merchants and peasants who barely had time to register his passing. His boots made no sound against the damp earth of the narrow corridor, a testament to the rigorous martial arts training he had endured since the bleak winters of his early childhood. The air here smelled of damp stone and lingering incense, a stark contrast to the lively fragrances of the main street just yards away, creating an eerie pocket of isolation in the heart of the bustling metropolis. He rounded a sharp corner, his muscles tensing for an immediate confrontation, only to find the alley completely deserted save for a single, freshly dropped silk ribbon fluttering in the dying wind. He picked it up slowly, his fingers brushing against the intricate embroidery of a blooming lotus flower, recognizing the unmistakable crest of the clandestine shadow guild that had plagued his family name for generations. Meanwhile, inside the quiet sanctuary of the academy, Tian Xiwei abandoned her desk and walked over to the grand wooden window, her instincts whispering that staying indoors would no longer keep her safe from the brewing storm. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small, encrypted wooden puzzle box, twisting its delicate brass gears until it clicked open with a soft, satisfying sound to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside lay a tattered map of the northern frontier, marked with red ink spots that formed a chilling pattern resembling the constellation of the desolate winter wolf. This was the very map her late mentor had risked, and ultimately lost, his life to secure before the mysterious fire consumed his entire estate under the cover of a pitch-black night. She knew that holding onto this artifact made her a prime target for the powerful factions currently vying for absolute dominance over the imperial throne, yet letting it go meant surrendering whatever lingering hope remained for justice. Her jaw set with fierce determination, and her bright eyes flashed with a steely resolve that proved she was far more than just a brilliant scholar reading books behind safe academy walls. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of bruised purple and brilliant orange, the two seemingly disconnected paths began to draw closer together. Murong Qingyi emerged from the labyrinthine slums on the east side of the city, his horse galloping fiercely through the dusty southern gates as he followed a trail of cryptic clues left behind by the elusive informant. Every pound of his horse's hooves against the dirt road echoed the rapid beating of his heart, driven by a relentless urge to uncover the truth behind the assassination attempt that had nearly claimed his younger brother's life a month prior. He knew the risks were astronomical, and that powerful enemies within the royal palace were already monitoring his every move with hawk-like precision, waiting for him to make a single fatal mistake. Yet, retreat had never been an option etched into his vocabulary, for he was a Murong, bound by honor and blood to protect the innocent from the ravenous wolves dressed in imperial robes. Simultaneously, Tian Xiwei secured her travel pack, strapped a compact crossbow to her forearm, and slipped out of the academy's back gate disguised as a humble apothecary's apprentice. She navigated the darkening streets with practiced ease, utilizing the shortcuts she had memorized during her countless late-night escapades exploring the city's hidden history and forgotten ruins. Her target was the abandoned pavilion near the riverbank, a place whispered to be haunted by the restless spirits of exiled poets, but which she knew served as the primary neutral meeting ground for underground resistance networks. The wind grew colder, biting at her cheeks as she pulled her woven hood lower to conceal her face from the occasional patrol of Imperial guards marching down the main avenues with torches held high. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist into menacing shapes, testing her nerve, but she pushed forward with steady, purposeful strides that defied the trembling of her hands. The two travelers arrived at the outskirts of the desolate riverbank district almost simultaneously, though neither was yet aware of the other's presence in the gathering gloom. Murong Qingyi reined in his panting stallion behind a cluster of thick willow trees, dismounting silently and tying the reins securely to a low-hanging branch before creeping forward on foot. He could see the faint flicker of candlelight emanating from the rotting wooden windows of the abandoned pavilion, casting long, erratic beams across the muddy banks of the winding river. Drawing his sword just an inch from its scabbard to ensure it wouldn't catch in a moment of crisis, he melted into the tall reeds bordering the path, blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. His senses were dialed up to their absolute maximum, catching even the soft rustle of leaves stirred by the evening breeze and the distant croaking of frogs in the nearby marshland. Tian Xiwei approached the pavilion from the opposite side, keeping her back pressed tightly against the crumbling stone wall of an old storage shed to maintain total concealment. She clutched the encrypted puzzle box tightly against her chest, feeling its sharp corners press through her tunic as she waited for the predetermined signal. 3 soft hoots of an owl followed by a brief flash of blue fire. The silence of the night was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic crashing of the river waves against the rotten wooden pilings underneath the sagging structure of the meeting place. Suddenly, a sharp metallic click echoed from the interior of the pavilion, instantly freezing her in her tracks and making her hold her breath so as not to betray her exact position. Someone else was already inside the building, and judging by the heavy, disciplined footsteps pacing across the creaking floorboards, this visitor was definitely not the ally she had been expecting to meet. Murong Qingyi heard the exact same sound, his instincts instantly flaring as he dropped into a low combat crouch among the tall, swaying reeds near the back entrance. He crept closer to the rotting wooden wall, finding a wide gap in the decaying planks through which he could peer into the dim, shadowy interior of the grand hall. To his utter shock, he did not see the expected face of the corrupt spy he was hunting, but instead spotted a delicate, unfamiliar figure standing near the central pillar holding a strange wooden box. The flickering candlelight illuminated her profile just enough for him to recognize the intense determination in her eyes, a look that mirrored his own unyielding stubbornness in the face of insurmountable danger. Before he could process who she might be or why she was meddling in dangerous underground affairs, a loud crash shattered the tense silence as the front doors were violently kicked open from the outside. A dozen masked assassins clad in pitch-black leather armor poured into the pavilion like a flood of venomous snakes, brandishing gleaming steel sabers that reflected the eerie orange candlelight. Their leader, a towering brute with a jagged scar running across his left cheek, let out a harsh, mocking laugh that echoed menacingly off the damp stone walls. So, the little rat finally decided to crawl out of her safe academic hole, the brute sneered, pointing his blood-stained blade directly toward the spot where Tian Xiwei stood frozen. Tian Xue's heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her face remained remarkably composed as she slid her hand down to the loaded crossbow strapped securely to her forearm. She knew she was wildly outnumbered and outmatched in raw physical strength, but she also knew the layout of this ruin better than anyone else alive, and she had no intention of going down without a fierce fight. Before the lead assassin could take another step forward, a sudden flash of silver light cut through the dim air, burying itself deep into the wooden floor right between his boots. Murong Qingyi burst through the rotting back wall in a flurry of shattered timber and swirling dust, his magnificent sword drawn and gleaming with lethal intent. "Get away from her," he commanded, his voice deep, resonant, and dripping with an icy authority that made even the battle-hardened mercenaries hesitate for a fraction of a second. Tian Xiwei gasped in genuine surprise as the handsome, blue-robed swordsman materialized out of nowhere to stand between her and the menacing horde of killers, his posture radiating absolute confidence and lethal grace. Despite the extreme peril of their current situation, a strange sense of undeniable relief washed over her, as if a missing piece of an ancient puzzle had finally clicked into its proper place. The masked leader recovered from his initial shock quickly, his eyes narrowing with pure malice as he recognized the legendary crest on the newcomer's belt. Well, if it isn't the righteous young master Murong coming to play the hero for a helpless scholar, he hissed with venomous delight. Kill them both and bring me that wooden box intact. The masters want no loose ends left in this accursed city tonight. With a unified roar, the entire pack of assassins charged forward simultaneously, their blades forming a deadly web of steel designed to butcher anything standing in their path. Murong Qingyi didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped smoothly into a classic defensive stance, his sword spinning in a blur of brilliant light that deflected the initial wave of downward strikes with deafening metallic clangs. He moved with the fluid grace of a swirling dragon, every strike calculated to disable or disarm without wasting a single ounce of precious energy. Seeing that her companion was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer volume of attackers, Tian Xiwei wasted no time standing idle as a helpless spectator to the unfolding violence. She raised her forearm, aimed the compact crossbow directly at the chest of an assassin lunging toward Murong Qingyi's exposed flank, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. The heavy steel bolt hissed through the air with terrifying speed, striking the attacker squarely in the shoulder and sending him crashing backward into a pile of broken crates with a sharp cry of agony. Murong Qingyi caught the movement out of the corner of his eye, a faint, appreciative smirk crossing his usually stoic face as he parried a vicious horizontal slash aimed at his neck. Not bad for an academic, he muttered playfully over the roaring din of clashing steel, gracefully pivoting to drive the pommel of his sword hard into another attacker's jaw. The battle inside the cramped pavilion escalated into a chaotic frenzy of flying dust, splintered wood, and the chilling ring of cold steel meeting bone and leather. Despite fighting back to back, the sheer number of skilled mercenaries began to take a heavy toll, pressing them closer and closer toward the dangerous, collapsing edge of the riverbank. Murong Qingyi's breath came in ragged gasps, his shoulders burning from the relentless parrying of heavy blows, yet his focus remained unbreakable as he shielded his newfound partner from the deadliest lunges. Tian Xiwei reloaded her crossbow with trembling fingers, her mind working at lightning speed to calculate the optimal trajectory to neutralize the looming leader who was currently circling them like a vulture waiting for an opening. She knew they couldn't sustain this defensive stalemate much longer before exhaustion set in and their defenses inevitably crumbled under the weight of numbers. With a fierce battle cry, the scarred leader lunged forward himself, bypassing the remaining foot soldiers to deliver a devastating overhead cleave aimed squarely at Murong Qingyi's head. Murong Qingyi ducked and blocked the crushing blow with both hands on his hilt, the immense impact forcing him down onto one knee as the floorboards groaned ominously beneath them. Seizing the golden opportunity, Tian Xiwei didn't aim for the brute's chest this time. Instead, she fired directly at the thick wooden rope pulley supporting the heavy iron chandelier dangling right above his head. The steel bolt severed the frayed rope cleanly, sending the massive, burning iron fixture crashing down onto the leader with a tremendous, deafening explosion of sparks and shattered glass. The brute let out a blood-curdling shriek as he was buried beneath the fiery debris, instantly shattering the morale of the remaining assassins who stared in absolute horror. Seeing their commander crushed and engulfed in flames, the surviving mercenaries lost their appetite for bloodshed, turning tail and fleeing wildly into the dark, welcoming shadows of the riverbank. Murong Qingyi pushed himself up from the floor, sheathing his blood-streaked sword with a sharp click before turning his gaze toward the clever young woman standing before him. "You fight rather well for someone who spends her entire day surrounded by dusty books and boring ledgers," he remarked, offering a warm, genuine smile that softened his sharp features entirely. Tian Xiwei lowered her smoking crossbow, letting out a long, shaky breath as the adrenaline finally began to ebb away from her exhausted limbs. "And you show up at the exact right moment for someone who supposedly acts entirely alone in this dangerous city," she retorted with a playful spark in her bright eyes. The tension in the air dissolved completely, replaced by an easy, unexpected camaraderie forged in the fiery crucible of life and death combat under the pale moonlight. Murong Qingyi stepped closer, extending his hand to help her steady herself against the unstable floorboards that were still smoldering from the fallen chandelier's flames. "It seems our paths were destined to cross tonight, Miss Tian," he said softly, his voice carrying a deeper meaning that extended far beyond the immediate